However, there is one condition, and it is that he must keep the Fenrir well tied up. Something our protagonist cheerfully accepts, turning to Fel to remind him that he must stay still. This makes Fel a little angry, since they are treating him like an irrational creature. Then Mukta threatens him with leaving him without food if he misbehaves. Because of this, Fel, all obedient, accepts. Already at the gate they ask for their guild cards, something the Prota does not have, and so he pays 5 silver coins. But since he has a familiar, he ends up paying 2 more coins, now at last arriving in the kingdom of Benin. While they are chatting, Werner comments that our Prota will be very busy, since with the arrival of the Fenrir, the Margrave of the area will not delay in informing the king. It is all the same to Makuta since he does not plan to stay long in the kingdom, given that with his online shop ability he plans to travel all over the world earning money. On hearing this, the big guy recommends that he register with the Adventurers Guild or with the Merchants Guild so that he will not have to pay entry taxes like a moment ago. Not being sure which to choose, they recommend that he register with both, since, although not many people do so, it is possible. Thus, now in the city, he runs into the famous Margrave, who, all insistent, invites him to his estate, something that ends up annoying Fel, who, with his imposing gaze, asks him whether by any chance he knows what happens to people who try to take advantage of his power. Thus at last the Margrave runs away. This worries the adventurers a little, since nobles usually take great care of their reputation, but Fel does not care in the least, since if that were the case he would not hesitate to use all his power. Franca thinks the same, since the only thing they could use against him would be an ancient dragon. Something Fel confirms, since that creature is the only thing that can match him in combat for 100 years ago, something that amazes everyone. Anyway, with everything settled, the two groups part ways. That is why we see Mukuel arrive at the Merchants Guild, where, imposing respect, he asks the receptionist for information to register. She kindly explains that they are an organization not affiliated with any country, that they have 5 ranks, and these determine the annual fees, the type of business, and its size. With all that, she asks what kind of merchant he wants to be, to which he answers that he wants to start as an itinerant seller. The receptionist tells him that starting at the lowest rank would be the most appropriate. Thus, after a brief explanation, they hand him his guild card, telling our Prota now that she will come the following morning to buy the articles he has. Already at the inn, he tells Fel that he cannot come in. Therefore he will sleep outside. Fel does not care about that, but what he does care about is his food since, well, he is hungry. Mukuta is thinking the same thing, remembering that they have not eaten yet, so all inspired, he starts to prepare the meal, with the first step being to make rice, since he was starting to miss it. After frying the meat, he opts to add soy sauce. Something that, when Faye tastes it, leaves him fascinated and he asks for still more, but this time when he tries it, he feels that the flavor has changed. So Mukuta explains to him that the first sauce was garlic, and the second was grated daikon radish. At night, the Prota gets ready to eat his precious rice accompanied by red boar meat, finally tasting what he missed so much, while Fel from behind asks him to let him try a little, thus both of them finishing everything. In his room, Mukuta cannot believe he has done so many things in one day, but even so he has to prepare his merchandise for tomorrow. The next day he goes to the Merchants Guild to sell what he promised. When the receptionist sees him, she asks him to wait a moment, and when she returns she asks him please to follow her to the back room. Thus we see him meeting with the guild master. The latter cannot believe what he is seeing, since throughout his entire life as master he has never seen salt and pepper of such high quality whatsoever. Therefore he offers 4 gold coins for the salt and 10 for the pepper. This seems excessive to Mukuta, since he bought each one for 5 copper coins. Because the master sees him somewhat pensive, he raises the offer, now offering 15 gold coins for both, and he keeps going like that until he reaches 17 gold coins. Although to Mukua it seems a bit abusive on his part, he is nonetheless grateful for the quick money. Thus, leaving the guild, he heads to the Adventurers Guild, where the somewhat sour receptionist explains how the ranks work, since adventurers have 7 ranks from G to S, and that he, being rank G, must accept at least 1 mission per month, and moreover that the guild takes no responsibility if he disappears. After this, Mukua thanks her and goes to look at the available missions, seeing there one that is about collecting medicinal herbs. With this set, we see him together with Fel, who demands that he give him the same food as yesterday. Then our black-haired lead remembers that in his world garlic was dangerous for dogs and cats. So, as a precaution, he checks Fel's stats, but when he does, he is surprised to find that everything is at the maximum. After a good night, we see the Prota who, ignoring our little wolf, washes his face, thinking that today is a great day for doing missions. Fel, fed up with being ignored, asks how he dares and whether he really planned to do the missions before giving him his food. Thus, all demanding, he asks for meat. Despite everything they ate, the glutton Fel still has an appetite. Therefore Mukuta recommends that he go hunt while he gathers his medicinal herbs. This seems fine to Fel, who, before leaving, senses several monsters nearby, and since he does not want anything to happen to him, he grants him Grandma's blessing, with which nothing will happen to him whatsoever. Having done this, he takes his leave, not without mentioning that he should get to work on preparing the meal, then vanishing at once. Mukuta, being alone, sets about collecting the herbs, something that would be easy using his appraisability, finishing the mission immediately, even faster than he thought. Therefore he sets about preparing the food and, taking the necessary supplies out of his shop, he chops the onions, sautés them, and adds minced meat. Once cooked, he mixes it with the sauce and, adding a little consommé, that is when Fel arrives with a rock bird, saying that he found the teriyaki so tasty that he went looking for another. Although he also has more creatures at the edge of the forest, he did not bring them because it was complicated, agreeing thus to go fetch them later. So Mukuta continues with his task, finishing by preparing his spaghetti with meat sauce with extra meat. To Fel, this looks like boiled vines, something our black-haired one denies since in his world people eat that and it is called spaghetti, adding also that it is very tasty. Our little wolf confirms it when he tries it, and although there is not a lot of meat, it is still delicious. Mukuta recommends adding grated cheese, something that ends up enchanting Fel, who cannot stop eating to the point of ending up completely smeared, which amuses Mukuta. Thus, at the forest entrance, our protagonist cannot believe what he is seeing, since Fel hunted a whole bunch of monsters. Then, stowing everything in his item box, he asks whether he really hunted all those beasts for his food. Fel confirms it, but on seeing the orcs he asks whether they are edible. He answers that they are, since humans themselves have eaten them for a very long time. Once he finishes putting the beasts away, he tells Fel that it is already time to return to the city to deliver the things to the guild. This seems a bit tedious to Fel. Therefore he asks him to climb onto his back, since that way they will take less time. This cheers Mukuta up a little, who, on the way, realizes it was a bad idea and asks him to wait. That is why, upon arriving in the city, we see him completely exhausted, since the speed he was going at was not human, asking him what would happen if he fell. Fel does not care about that, since that would be his own fault. Faced with this, Mukuta reminds him that if he dies he will never taste food from another world again. Thus, when he delivers the items to the kind receptionist, he surprises her a little for someone of rank G. While the receptionist is handing him his pay, our prota asks whether they buy monsters here. She is confused and thinks about it, but our black-haired lead clarifies that it was not he who hunted them but his familiar who is outside. When she sees Fel she falls in love, she even changes her face, but returning to her usual expression she tells him that at the window for selling parts of major prey they will help him. Thus a muscular man asks what he wants to sell, to which our prota takes out an orc, mentioning that he wants to start with 5 of those. The muscular man asks him to wait and that they should go to the back room. In this way we see them in that place. And Mukuta, taking out the entire storehouse of monsters he had, leaves the muscular man completely stupefied, who points out that it is more than he expected, since they are rank A and rank B creatures. This matters little to Mukuta, since he is only interested in knowing whether they are edible. The butcher confirms it, affirming that they are all delicacies. However, it will take at least a day to skin them all. Nevertheless, Mukuta is somewhat desperate for food for Fel, so he asks for a piece of meat for today. Thus, seeing the orcs, the butcher opts to give that. So we change scenes and we see Mukuta thinking about what to cook with that meat. There an idea occurs to him and, taking the ingredients out of the shop, he does his usual thing, finishing with the dish he calls two-flavor pork piccata. As always, Fel is fascinated by the taste and the texture, affirming that he could eat it forever, also pointing out that orc meat is more tender than red boar meat. Remembering this, Mukuta loses a bit of appetite, but in the same way he ends up eating, finding that it does not taste ugly at all. Far from it, he considers it luxury pork, reflecting therefore that one must not judge an ingredient without tasting it first, thus happily ending the day. The next morning he is in the back room to pick up his meat. There the muscular butcher shows him everything he is going to take, and, moreover, he brings out his pay, which is 202 gold coins. This seems like a lot to Mukuta. However, the butcher cannot believe that he does not know their real value. Thus, showing him an orc testicle, he tells him that those serve as aphrodisiacs, and so it goes with the parts of each monster. Well, that does not matter, and he hands him some magic stones, which are usually found in rank B and higher monsters. Changing the subject, he asks whether Fel really is a Fenare or whether by any chance he is a giant wolf. Although, from his experience as an adventurer, he is sure that he is a Fenrare. This seems like good information to Makuta, who, while walking, thinks that he could simply say that Fel is a great wolf and thus avoid so much scandal. While he is thinking this, Fel, all hungry, interrupts him to remind him that it is already time for him to start preparing his meal. Thus we see them arrive at some ruins where they plan to camp for today. Their feller reproaches him for not knowing how to ride, since otherwise they would already have gotten farther. But he reminds him of the most important thing. That is right, the dinner. Makua knows this too. Therefore, since today they made a fortune with what Fel hunted, they will give themselves a treat. Thus, both of them, browsing the online shop, choose what to eat. On seeing so much delicious food, Fel starts drooling. Then, upon receiving the purchase, he gives Fel his platter of assorted meat from another world. Unable to contain himself before such a delicacy, he starts eating like a pig. While he is savoring his plate, Makua takes the opportunity to prepare the main course, this being a black waka steak. Something that disappoints Fel because of the size, but when he tastes it he cannot believe it, since the flavor and that tender texture are from another world. And Makuta explains that that meat was specially raised with the utmost care to obtain the best marbling, astonishing Fel even more, since he cannot believe that in his world they raise cattle especially for consumption, something that does not happen in this world, since it is full of beasts and it is enough just to hunt. The Prota explains that in his world hunger to create new foods never runs out. That is why everything he makes seems like a delicacy. Fel confirms this, continuing to enjoy his food. As night falls, they chat, and Fel comments that when he eats his food he feels full of energy, especially today when he feels capable of defeating with ease the ancient dragon he fought against. This seems strange to our protagonist. Therefore, asking permission to see his stats, he sees how everything increased by 50. F interrupts him to say that he is going to go hunting, since with all this it would be a waste, and even before leaving he gives him the improved grandma's blessing, since not even a dragon's breath could harm him. Having said this, he departs. While Makuta sleeps, we see Fel go wild and hunt every beast he sees. He even finishes off a chimera. And the next morning our protagonist, all frightened, asks what all this is. Since there are 3 pillars of monsters: metal lizards, orcs, and blue ogres. Fel excuses himself by saying that he was having fun and did not realize the excess, but more importantly, he asks him about that 3-headed monster, at which F explains that it is a chimera, a creature that usually costs him to finish off, but that now he did it with an ease even he himself could not believe. Mukuza now understands it, and therefore decides to take measures, thinking, no more black wagyu meat. Elsewhere, the receptionists were gossiping, with the brown-haired one telling the other that she is in love with the individual who came to the guild, since that presence and how handsome he was seemed divine to her, and most important of all, he was furry. That is right, she is referring to Fel. Well, back with the adventurers, they are eating cockatrice with soy sauce glaze and their sandwich. Delighting in his meal, Fel says that it is lighter than the rock bird and, as usual, it has good flavor. What comes to Makuta's mind is when people compare chicken with duck, since both have their own taste. Therefore Fel gets the idea to go hunt another rock bird. This gets our protagonist thinking, and he asks him whether he uses magic when he hunts monsters. He confirms it since it is easier for him when there are several, but that normally he tends to use claws and teeth, emphasizing that he is the best at wind magic. This is because he was blessed by the goddess Ninder. There he also mentions that the shield he used with him was magic. All of this amazes Makuta, so he asks him whether he could also use magic.